All right. I am talking to a man who just described himself as a weird Irish bastard. We're talking to David Nihill. He is a comic or a comedian, whatever you want to call them. What's the correct terminology, David? Is it a comic or a comedian?
Comic or comedian, both works. To be honest, I'm neither. I just did a year's experiments kind of pretending to be one. So, yeah, okay. I'd love to be a comedian. I don't know if I'm that good, but I definitely faked it as one for a while.
Well, today, David is going to teach you how to become a funnier speaker. Comic secrets to becoming a funnier speaker. Now, not just a speaker, by the way, because maybe you're not a speaker. Maybe you don't get up in front of people and speak. But just be a funnier person in general. If you're a man, women always say, I love a man with a good sense of humor. And so if you can make a woman laugh, then you're a step ahead of the next guy. Also, if you have a business and you have marketing, maybe you send an email out, how do you avoid those dreaded emails that are just boring and dull? How do you put a little bit of humor into them? And then just generally speaking, maybe people don't think of you as being a funny person. Maybe you're just a stand-up guy or stand-up woman, whatever, but maybe you're not known for your humor. Well, we're going to fix that today. David Nihill from Ireland, who's joining us from just outside of San Francisco. How are you, David? Great to have you here, mate.
Very good. Thanks for having me.
And which part of Ireland are you from?
Dublin, the exotic part.
Yeah, Dublin. That's a great town. I was there in 1999 for the Rugby World Cup.
Oh, yeah. You and me both. I was there.
Yeah, it's a good time, Dublin. Very wonderful place. Nice Irish women too. I love that. Big fan of those.
Yeah, we're not. That's why we're over here. Trying to hide from them.
So, mate, what does it take to be funny? How do we kick this off? I want you to give us a few tips here on how we can be funnier in our speaking, on how we can be funnier in general. But I mean, is it something that you can learn, or is it just you naturally got it or you naturally don't got it?
Yeah, no, it's definitely something you can learn. So, I mean, humor is a skill, and anything that's a skill that can be broken down a bit to its finer point and practice. And I think one thing that I really noted, or one thing I really took from a year's experiments doing stand-up comedy, was how many of these guys that were crushing it on comedy stages were not funny off stage whatsoever. Like, not even a little bit. You'd be hanging out with 8 or 9 guys, and you're like, I'm hanging out with 8 or 9 comedians tonight. This should be hilarious. And it wasn't whatsoever. But the one thing they had common is when it came to put that skill into action, they had stuff that they knew would absolutely crush it for a limited time period on stage. That they'd very much scripted, they very much practiced, they very much knew the words that were going to come out of their mouth nearly all of the time. So I would say to any of your listeners, yeah, I mean, a lot of guys are like, oh, I'm not funny, but you definitely can be funny, and you definitely can be funnier. Maybe not in life all the time, but definitely on stage for a speaking event or on scripting your own personal stories. So I mean, a really great way to get started on all this, and probably the safest way to use humor is to use your own stories. So just funny stuff that's happened to you, note it down, and just learn how to deliver it a bit more effectively and not bore people and get to the funny part. Because I think I've lived in 12 countries now, and I've been to 50 something. And you'd think the funny stuff would be crazy stuff to happen to me, like in Vietnam or China, that, the average person hasn't experienced. But ultimately, actually, I get more laughter out of stuff that's happened to me in Safeway or just walking down to the local supermarket. So it's stuff that people can actually relate to.
Yeah. And I guess for the listener who might be saying, oh, I don't have anything funny, it is just everyday life that you can pull things from, right? Like I think Seinfeld and Curb Your Enthusiasm was genius, and those two TV shows were genius at pulling just like the everyday monotony and making it hilarious.
Yeah, exactly. And even just, you don't have to be Seinfeld's a pretty high bar to set, because that guy's got some serious skills when it comes to writing this out. But there is some techniques for writing it out, to manage that whole process, and to just take stuff that's a little bit more mundane and bring it to life a little bit. And the best way to start is just literally on your smartphone to make a list of funny stories that you can remember in your head, things that have happened to you, things you already like to share with your friends and your family. And then literally just start going to the comedy show and a storytelling show, and as it jogs memories, just consciously write them down and start making a list. And that essentially becomes a list that you're always going to draw upon. You literally end up with a story for every topic if you keep doing this for a while. It won't all come to you the first time you sit down to start it, but over the process of a couple of weeks, it definitely will.
Okay, because I know you actually you're a comedian now and you're a public speaker, but you were once terrified of being in front of an audience too, weren't you? I mean, you were.
Oh, I hate public speaking. And honestly, I still hate it. But now it's just manageable. Like now I'm the only one that knows I'm sweating buckets before I go on stage. Like I've kind of managed it. So 2 weeks ago I had to do a storytelling night. It's NPR's The Moth, which is a very popular storytelling series. And I was in their final. It was a competition. It was 1,400 people. So I nearly laid an egg before I went on stage. But nobody would have known that because when I was on stage, I looked totally confident in what I was saying and what I was doing. But everything that went into the preparation of that was stuff that comedians tend to draw upon before they do public speaking. So yeah, I absolutely hate public speaking. But
Wow.
the nice thing is if you stick to your own topics and you know stuff is funny and you know you have an opening line that's going to get you off to a good start, or you know really how to script a performance a little bit, it will go much better. The problem with public speaking is when you wing it. Like if you're not prepared, like it's going to go horribly wrong sooner or later. It might go okay for a couple of times, but when you actually start consciously videoing yourself and making yourself watch it back, you're going to be rubbish. Like you realize it yourself. Because if you had asked me the first couple of times I did public speaking, I would have said it was probably it went pretty okay. I mean, it felt okay to me. When I watched it back on video, I was terrible. I was just rubbing the microphone around my head like I was trying to paint colors of myself and nervously pacing around. And it's that conscious editing that comedians are fantastic at doing that the average person doesn't really do, and the average business speaker certainly does not do.
All right, so let's go over this now. So you said number one was make a list of funny things that have happened to you.
Exactly.
You said go to a comedy show so you can just see some other people doing it, and then write down. Well, actually, that was the first tip. Really, was write down the list of funny things that have happened to you, and that list becomes what you draw to. So,
exactly.
Is there anything to expand on that in terms of writing things down? Is it just like, but what is funny? Like, what might be funny to you may not be funny to someone else. So, can you give us a little bit more specificity around what?
Yeah, for sure. So it's about finding the funny bit in that story. Chances are, if you find it funny and it's not risky humor, like it's not below the belt, it's not racial, it's not something that might offend somebody along the way. Chances are, if you really find it funny, there's probably something funny in there. So it's a matter of writing it and getting to the funny part quicker. What most people do when they're telling us a story is they bore the pants off the audience with 4 minutes of unnecessary background info. Like, oh, and it was a nice day and she was walking up the road and the shoes she was wearing. You're like, do I really need to know any of that stuff? Just get to the funny part. So what comedians have no choice but to do, because their audience won't tolerate it, will like start heckling them or throwing bottles at them if they don't get there, is to get to the point quickly. So I would say find the key funny part to that story and make sure you get to the key funny part within 3 lines. If you haven't got to the punchline, the funny part effectively becomes the punchline. And your job is to set that up with an introduction statement that people can relate to. So if I have a crazy story about in China, like when a guy drove into me in a car on the sidewalk and nearly killed me and then gave out to me for being on the sidewalk, which is not where you'd expect to have a car in the first place in China, those little quirky things are relatable to me. If I start off that story when I was in China, people who've never been to China aren't going to care about it. So the idea is to set that opening statement up in a way that as many people can relate to the experience as possible. So alternatively, I would say being in a new place can be crazy. And everybody's been in a new place at some stage in their life. So now they're actually with you as you go in to tell your story and get to the funny part as quickly as possible.
So it's actually setting up an opening statement that makes every member of the audience feel like they're involved.
Exactly, if you can. Because the key to storytelling, and the same thing with a funny joke, if your jokes are going to be based on stories in everyday life, is to allow as many people as possible to see themselves in your story. Like great storytelling is all about having the listener imagine themselves in your shoes. And if they've never been to China, then the opening statement doesn't relate to them in that example. So the ultimate story and joke telling always comes from other people seeing themselves in your shoes.
So just go over that example again. Like the wrong way would be the wrong first sentence of that joke would be, and the correct first sentence of that joke is.
Yeah, so the wrong, but I should say it still works a lot of the time, the wrong, depending on your audience, and depending on the length of the story. But the wrong way to set it up, or not the optimal way to set it up, is I was in China last year and this happened. You really want to try and tell it in the present tense, create a story in the present tense, and draw as many people in as you can. So the optimal way to set that up is being in a new place can be crazy. And then you're like, I was walking down the street in China, and then you create the moment on stage like it's a part of a play playing out in front of you, and you use words in the present tense instead of in the past tense. And if I'm using words in the present tense, like I'm walking and I see, instead of I was walking and I saw, it creates more of a storyline that people can imagine themselves in, because you're really acting out a little scene for them in the moment, as opposed to giving them a historic account of it.
So even when you're saying I was walking down the street in China, it implies that it was the past, though.
Exactly. But I would say I'm walking down the street. So when I start to tell that story, it's like I'm walking down the street and this guy comes over and he says, and then you can literally act out his voice if you want. And you're like, oh, hello, what you doing on street, or whatever your worst accent is. But I mean, you get a lot of credit in the world of comedy and storytelling for actually defaulting to any accent that is not your own. So even if you're someone who's like, oh, I can't do voices, I'm pretty sure you can do an impression of your mother, or you can do an impression of someone in your family. Just default to their voice for the other character in the story that you're about to tell. And when you do that live on stage, it makes a big, big difference.
So what's great is to mimic someone else's accent.
Exactly. And it can be anything, but it's gotta be safe. So like think, do impersonations of your friends, use their voices, or your family before you do foreigners. Because as you know, being an Aussie, you've been subject to too many dodgy impersonations of Australian accents in your time. and it might offend you after a while. If I start this podcast, oh yeah, mate, I'm right, excited to be here today. I'm talking to you, mate, from Queensland. Hey, I used to live in there. And you're like, oh, what is this fella doing? Don't be annoying me.
And if I did it the same way back to you and said, it's the Crack Lake. Yeah, it's the Crack Lake.
Exactly.
We'll go to Dublin Lake. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, it's the Crack Lake. It's the Crack Lake.
Exactly. I'd be like, what is that
guy on?
Exactly. But if you just pick a neutral one, which is someone in your family or your parents, or, just somebody in your work that you're used to doing little impersonations of, it can be any variation in your own voice whatsoever. But it just helps bring that story to life a little bit. So
I met Arnold Schwarzenegger in Los Angeles a couple of weeks ago and got a photo with him. In fact, if you're listening to this, you go onto my Instagram at James Swanwick, and you can see from April 2015, you can see a photo of me meeting Arnold Schwarzenegger. Is it okay to do an impersonation of a famous person? Is that all right?
Yeah, as long as you're decent at it.
Yeah, I don't think I'm decent at it. I'll give it a try, though. He basically said to me, so hang on, let me practice doing this, because I was speaking in the past tense there, so I need to put it in the present tense, right? So I'm hanging out at the Sunset 5 Plaza on Sunset Boulevard in Los Angeles, and lo and behold, who walks in but Arnold Schwarzenegger? And he sees me and he says, check out the muzzles on this guy. There you go. You laughed. I don't know whether you were being polite or whether that was...
Yeah, it was a mix, but you're progressing.
I'm progressing.
I mean, that's the idea. You become the characters, and you'll see a stand-up comedian on stage. They do that. They'll actually turn their head left and speak on one side when they're doing one voice, and then they'll speak to the other direction on the other voice. And it's just a way of showing people that they're becoming two different people for the scene that they're creating.
So how could I have told that story better in a comic way? I basically was saying I am walking in and there's Arnold Schwarzenegger and he says, check out the muscles on this guy.
Well, yeah, I would flip the expectations a bit. So now I expect you're talking about your muscles. But, the funny bit in that story was if the joke was at your expense. And I was like, I thought he was talking to me, but yeah, it turns out it wasn't.
Okay.
It was a guy next to me because you're kind of big. Because you were saying
but
he
was talking about me, though.
yeah. Well, fair enough.
So now I can't tell that joke because then the audience is thinking this guy's trying to he's big noting himself because
exactly. So
I would Mr. Olympia told him that he had muscles, and that's obviously a compliment. And I guess anything that makes you come across as like you're bragging or anything, the audience is not going to like, right?
Exactly. You can get away with it if you've already made a few jokes at your own expense. But yeah, off the start of the gate, like the ultimate message in that story is I'm in pretty good shape, which is fine. But you better make a few at your own expense to start with. So you're like, if you told the audience you used to be a fat booger, then that's perfectly fine because it's a story of progress. But if it's just I'm awesome, then they'll kind of chuckle, but they won't give you all the plaudits you want.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Because the missing background information for you to be happy in that is probably you were out of shape at some stage in life, and now you're in shape, and Arnold Schwarzenegger noticed, which is cool. So, but you'd get a much bigger laugh telling that story if you've already told a story at your expense about how you were fat and some chick like gave you, I don't know, gave you abuse for it, or you felt bad about it in some way. So then the audience is with you in your progression because they're happy for you.
Gotcha. Another way I could have flipped it again is to make fun of my vanity, right? Like if that made me feel good that he said that, then maybe I could start it off by saying, you know, I'm a vain bastard and blah, blah, blah. And I'm always like, blah, blah. And so when I walked in, Arnold Schwarzenegger, blah, blah, you know, said that I had muscles, and then somehow come back to making fun of myself again, like at how I was like skipping down the street because the 6-time Mr. Olympia told me that I had muscles. And
yeah, exactly. And he's known for his sense of humor as well, so he might have been taking the piss out of you.
Yeah.
But, you know, he used it, and if you read his autobiography, normally it wouldn't be something I'd kind of read his book, but a friend recommended, who is a very good entrepreneur, and he's like, the lessons in there are phenomenal about how you can pick targets and go after them. But
Total Recall is the name of the book.
It is a fantastic read. But one of the big points in there, and he used it politically very well, is to be likable more than anything else. So he used humor all the time in all his speeches and campaigns. And when he didn't know what the campaign was about, he didn't really seek to learn. He's like, I'll just make a few jokes at my own expense and it'll be fine. And it was a strategy that Ronald Reagan used really, really well.
It's funny you should say that. I just read a book called Reagan on Leadership. It was all about Ronald Reagan's leadership style, and you're right. You know, he was obviously a natural presenter and speaker because he started in Hollywood. He was a radio DJ, and then he moved on to acting and did a couple of films, and then moved into onto the public stage in terms of politics. But he was always very good at poking fun at himself and making little jokes and little short quips here and there. And that was why people had so much affection towards him.
Yeah, he went for likability, and a lot of political candidates these days will do that over anything else, because it's the same with getting laughs. At the end of the day, if people don't like you, they're not going to laugh at your jokes. So number one is about likability, and then the laughs will follow. But yeah, if somebody doesn't like you off the gate, and they're not going to laugh at your jokes.
So how do you make people like you? Is it always being self-critical and making fun at your own expense? And if it is, what are a couple of examples of making fun at your own expense?
Yeah, they say you should only make fun at your own expense if you're already in a strong position or a position of power. So deprecating humor, as it's called, is at its most effective when you're already the president, the boss, the CEO. You're in a notable position because you're trying to bring yourself down a level or two. So I was in one of the presidential campaigns. I think it was Ronald Reagan, when he was getting a lot of flack for being much, much older than his opponent in the media. And during the final debate, he said, I don't want to use my opponent's inexperiences and youth against him. And everybody laughed, and it totally flipped the scenario. So he was acknowledging that he was a bit of an old fart at the time, but equally he managed to flip that. So the joke was at himself, but it's only when he's in a position of power. So I would say you can be self-deprecating, but you don't want to be overly depending on the situation you're in. So if you're in the boss of the company, absolutely, self-deprecating humor is number one to start with, and go from there. If you're on a low level already, maybe not as much. Like, it won't get as big as a reaction. So you can mix them up. There's no right or wrong way to go with that.
So if you are lower level and you're not the boss man and no one knows who you are, and you're about to speak at a conference or in a boardroom or whatever, and people don't really know who you are, and you don't have a huge following or whatever, you're not someone of stature in the environment that you are speaking in, how can you?
Yeah, you risk reducing your credibility if the jokes start off at your own expense. So I would just say, just use some humor a little bit. If you have an accent, for example, if nobody knew who you were in a conference, you'd say, well, listen, today's a bit risky. I didn't bring my translator with me. There's a bit of a heavy Australian accent here. I hope you guys will be fine with it. And now they're not worrying where you're from anymore, because guaranteed for the first 15 or 20 seconds, they're trying to figure out where you're from, especially in America, where they're like, oh, you might be from Canada, New Zealand, Scotland. You could be anywhere. They haven't narrowed it down just yet for a lot of the time. So you want to make sure they're paying attention to you at the start. So that would be a much easier joke for you to make.
Hey, James here. Just a short interruption to share with you some of the results that folks have been getting inside of our 90-day stop drinking process. This is Jessica Gaines-Jarbo from Kentucky. She says, I've now got joy, focus, presence, clarity. This is Glenn Granger from Massachusetts. I'm more patient. This is Jenny Unglis from Northern Ireland. I discovered strength I didn't know I had. This is Doug Rice from Texas. I have unbelievable clarity. This is George Bird from New York. I'm calmer. And this is Russell Belcher from Australia. My health has improved. I've lost 20 pounds, says John Keltner in California. If you would like to create these type of results, then you are welcome to apply to be part of our 90-day stop drinking process, which is called Project 90. The link is in the show notes. You can go to alcoholfreelifestyle.com/Project 90. Back to the show. I'll be speaking in London next month to a whole lot of Brits, and I used to live in London, actually. I was there 99 through 2002, but I haven't been there in 2009. And I'm Australian, obviously. So what might be a good way to start? I'll come up on stage and they don't really know who I am. What might be a good little joke off the bat that maybe plays on my Australian accent?
Yeah, you can play on a few things. It really depends. Like sport is always a good one, depending on your crowd, with the big rivalry between England and Australia. But you can say I'm a bit back from it because I'm in the US now, and then the joke becomes at the expense of some of the US sporting performances or where you're going. It'll come back to your accent, you, or something very related to the conference. But it's nearly one of the harder things to put together as an opening line that you can use all the time to get a quick laugh. And it's something that needs a little bit of work and needs to be a little bit specific to your crowd. So it's hard to tell you exactly. But yeah, if something just happened in sport, in the world of cricket, especially with that audience, or in the world of rugby, or in the world of anything sporting rivalry-wise, it's something that's easy and safe. And so I don't know what happened in the last Ashes test, but I'm guessing England probably lost because they normally do.
Yeah, they didn't do too well in the World Cup cricket. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, and Aussies are known for gloating a little bit at sports sometimes when they win, because you guys do win a lot. And you're like, I'm Australian. Don't worry. I saw what happened in the Ashes. I'm not here to focus on that. And then off you go a little bit.
And then I could go on. I'm not here to focus on the fact that Michael Clark scored 100 against you. I'm not going to talk about the fact that the team was bowled out for 123. And I'm definitely not going to talk about the fact that we beat you and the blah, blah, blah. I'm not here to do that. I'm here.
Yeah. Exactly. Easy. But depending on your crowd, if they know their cricket, and if, that a lot of them are English, or have a lot of them traveled from overseas to come, because only you in English. I mean, Ireland, we went to the quarterfinals in the Cricket World Cup and nobody even knew. It only got some attention when we beat England. So not everybody's going to know that sporting rivalry. So it's number one, knowing your audience, who's likely in the crowd and what sort of humor they're likely to respond to.
We're speaking to David Nihill, who, by his own admission, is a weird Irish bastard. He's the author of a great book called Do You Talk Funny? You can find it on Amazon. It's going to be coming out in hard copy later on in 2015. Do You Talk Funny by David Nihill. That's Nihill. I would encourage you to grab a copy on Amazon right now and check it out. He's also creator of a conference series called funnybiz.co. That's Funny biz, bizz.co. He actually has created that business with a good friend of mine, Rackman, who is a real character. And it was Rackman who actually very kindly introduced us. And suggested that Dave would be a good guest on the James Swanwick Show. So thank you to Rackman. If you're listening to this now, you too are a funny bastard. Just take away the Irish part. You're just a funny American bastard. He's very good at breaking women's hearts too, I have to say, Rackman. I've seen him do it.
Rackman, he's the grenade, we say. We just throw him into any group there and he'll have them all chatting and laughing away within about 2 minutes.
He's the best opener I've ever seen. It's good.
He is good. He went to Norway recently and somehow did 4 minutes of stand-up comedy in Norwegian, even though he doesn't speak one word of Norwegian. I have no idea how he figured out to do that, but he's pretty good at memorization. So he wrote all the jokes and basically memorized 4 minutes worth of Norwegian, and off he went to a full crowd.
All right, so we've got make a list of funny things that have happened to you. I've got a little bit of background noise here. Apologies to the listener. It's 9 o'clock in the morning where I'm recording this at the moment, and the garbage truck down the street has just decided to come in at this time. It usually comes in a bit later. Anyway, how would I make a joke about that, David? There you go. I'm just talking about the background noise as a garbage truck. So what might be a good way there that I can bring humor into this interview to make light of the fact that there's background noise?
Yeah, just say I mean, it's good to in comedy they call that acknowledging the obvious. So just never ignore anything. So like the opposite of humor you could have done there is just keep going and not explain the background noise. So the joke in there is your professionalism. Just say I will not operate under anything that's suboptimal conditions. I have asked this truck to be part of the background to contribute really to the noise here because we have two foreigners and nobody's going to understand the accent anyway. So it's probably the best bit of clarity we have on the show. Thank you, garbage truck.
Clever. I see what you did there. That was good. That's good. So never ignore something obvious. Like always acknowledge.
Exactly. A comedian will say it calling the room, but like if you're doing badly, if your last joke didn't work, the easiest way to get a laugh is to tell people like, "Oh God, that joke wasn't so good." Like it worked pretty well when I was at home practicing on my cat last night. Granted, I had a few beers and I think the cat was sleeping, but it was still pretty funny, and they're gonna laugh because it's only. I mean, ultimately, the audience wants you to to do really well. Like they don't want to see you suffering up there, but they will a little bit if you don't acknowledge that you're doing terribly. Because have you ever sat and watched the speaker doing horribly and you're like, please let it be over. I feel so bad for this person. But you feel way worse when they don't seem to know that they're doing terrible, where they just keep going through the slides and they're like, yeah, this is great. I'm delivering world-beating information here. So a comedian will always acknowledge the obvious. Like if it's too hot in the room, if they just did something wrong, if they made a mistake, if nobody's listening to them, if someone's asleep in the front row, they will call attention to those things because those things are an easy laugh in the moment and they show that you're a bit human and you're not a machine up there just spouting facts.
I did actually learn that lesson back in about 1992. There was a colleague, not a colleague. He was a high school friend of mine, and he was the head of the Student Representative Council. And every Friday at school assembly, he would have to go up for a few minutes and give an update about the SRC, which is the Student Representative Council. And he was very funny. And he would usually go up there and he'd make some jokes and everyone would laugh. And I remember one particular day was he's walking out to the microphone and everyone was clapping because I knew he was really funny. And he said his opening line and it wasn't good. It just fell flat. It was just not a very funny thing. And everyone kind of like, oh. And then he turned and he sort of looked up and he paused and he went, sorry.
Yeah, and there's the laugh.
And then everybody laughed. The whole 2,000 kids are just in hysterics, and
people want to see you do well. Like ultimately, they're just waiting for you to acknowledge that something you said, it didn't work as well, and then that's fine. The only time you bomb is when you don't acknowledge just how badly you're doing, and you keep going like you're a rock star.
Yeah. Okay. So always acknowledge when you're bombing. All right.
Yeah, exactly. Just call the likely thoughts or the likely opinions of the room, vocalize them, and do it from the speaker that went on before you. Expand on their points or comment on their likely reaction to stuff, and that it's basically just create something impromptu in the moment between you and the audience that you couldn't have rehearsed. So they give you extra credit. The nice thing is, over time, the more you're on stage, the more you're gonna face those kind of situations. So the more it looks impromptu for the audience in the future, but it's actually a situation you'll have dealt with before in the past. So you actually know what to say based on experience. And comedians are amazing at doing that. So in the book, we talked about it as rehearsed spontaneity, but it's creating moments to look spontaneous, but actually are not. They're very, very well practiced.
Okay, let's talk about a first date in the courting process, all right? Whether you're a man, whether you're a woman, you obviously want to make a good impression. What can you do with humor on a first date, and what should you absolutely not do on a first date? Because I'm thinking that maybe you don't want to be that self-deprecating if you're trying to make an impression.
Well, if you're a big-ass muscly dude like yourself, and Arnold Schwarzenegger's even noticing these things, I think it won't do you any harm just to play down to play down yourself and be aware of poking fun of yourself, and it lets them know there's no big ego involved in life. But yeah, if you have a collection of funny stories that you like to tell and you know how to tell them in their most effective form, plus if you pull together, I don't know, from my own experience, I haven't been on a date in a while because I have a girlfriend, so she'll kill me if I give you recent examples. So I'm going to speak exclusively in the past. But no, it was kind of like tying it together like a comedy show. Like a comedy show, a movie, a story, they will always use something called the bookend technique, which kind of ties all the information together. If you're on a date and this girl or guy is giving you a series of information and facts, if you're able to tie them all together at the end to show that you've actually been listening to everything they say, it becomes automatically a little bit funnier than it normally would. So a girl will normally, so if you're like, oh, you're the kind of person, well, you're up doing yoga in the morning, you won't be out drinking because you always do yoga at 7, and your brother's kind of crazy, he'll probably be there with you, and you had this stalker guy, he'll be far behind, and that little dog who follows you around who you love, he'll be there. You just tie all the information that she or he gave you back and present it back to them. It creates more of an engagement level between the two of you. So I would say use that, like make fun of a lot of the stuff they're telling you, but actively show them that you've been listening to everything they've said as well.
Yeah, that's good. So, and especially women, men's not so much, but women love to be heard. They love to know that you've listened to them. And so if you can recite things back to them.
Exactly. It forces you to be in the moment with them as well. You're not trying to think. Just, guys are always trying to think of the next thing they're going to say. Just shut up and listen for a while and sum it up, and you'll probably get more points for that, because everybody loves talking about themselves.
We're talking to David Nihill. You can check him out on Twitter at FunnyBizSF. SF stands for San Francisco. That's at FunnyBizSF.
That's a world-changing Twitter handle, that one there. You're like, how did he get any followers with this handle? He chose the worst one ever. Can't even pronounce it. Is this linked to your name? Not whatsoever.
Check him out also at his website, funnybiz.co.
Yeah, and I also have 7, that's the number 7, comedy habits if you want anything specifically on public speaking. And you'll find a few articles there on Inc. as well, which I'm a columnist for in that area.
David Nihill, Nihill, if you want to Google him as well. So what about the written word? We're talking about writing things, sending out an email to an email list, or if you're having a text message conversation, or you're sending an email back and forth. Do the rules change?
No. I mean, it's pretty much the same. It's be funny, be concise. I mean, if you're telling a story, or email's a little bit different because you're just trying to grab attention. So like what we use a lot, and you'll find this on Funny Biz actually website, and I think this would be magic for dating, and I've been giving it to a few of my friends who are single at the moment, is using GIFs. So rather than send something following up on an email as to why they didn't respond, we'll just send them a picture of a Cookie Monster looking impatient, tapping a desk as a little GIF video, and I will do that to everyone. Rockman does it, and the response rate is massive. So even in the world of dating, I was out with my friend this Saturday, and this girl hadn't replied to him, and I was like, just send her a picture of this Cookie Monster looking really bored and cute. And sure enough, you'll find a list of them there on our page at funnybiz.co, 12 ones that work really well. But they're ones that we've used in business to great effect, to great response, reaching out to influencers, reaching out to cold emails, anyone reaching out to cold contacts, anyone who hasn't given you a response will nearly always respond to them. And if they don't respond to the first one, I just send them another one. And it saves you looking desperate, because it's kind of funny and entertaining and quirky, and you're not really going, oh, why didn't you write back to me?
I like that a lot. The Cookie Monster waiting. He's just kind of like with his hand on his desk.
Oh, he's brilliant. And then we have him watching like a pendulum swimming, and there's one of Gandalf standing there looking really annoyed waiting. And just the cuter and funnier they are, like it just saves you a lot of effort. And people really respond to them because, one, they're not used to getting them in their inbox. And your inbox or your phone is just, a lot of spam and a lot of stuff you're not excited about seeing. That one really helps you stand out.
And what's the subject line when you're sending an email with a Cookie Monster waiting?
Nothing. No, well, I send the original contact, which is what I'm asking for. So whether it's dating, it's a follow-up inquiry, whether it's a cold email to somebody, the information's in the first email. And then if they don't respond, they'll get a Cookie Monster 24 hours later. And if they don't respond, another 24 hours later, they'll get another one. And we'll keep that going up to 5 or 6 different little quirky videos. And I think nearly every single person except one really, really famous writer has responded to that. And I mean everybody, like all the way through to New York Times bestselling writers to CEOs of companies. Like I've got every one of them to reply to me with no more than 5 GIF videos except for one. And that was when I was just starting out and I had no platform and I hadn't written the book and I didn't know anybody, but I just needed to get some information. So it is really, really effective because it's kind of funny.
Do you write anything around that Cookie Monster waiting image, or do you just do the image and that's it?
No, just the image and that's it. There's one there you'll see on the site, which is just a bale of hay blowing through a deserted street. And that one I'll kind of write, are you still alive? Just press any key, hit send. And then it'll be like, come on, you can do it. We're still alive. I don't want to have a funeral in your honor I don't want to have that awkward call to your family to tell them that you're dead. So assume you're alive. Get back to me. I'm getting worried about you.
I like that. So where can we find those ones? Where can we find them?
Funnybiz.co. And we have a list of 12 on there. You can go to Giphy.com as well, and there's a whole ton of them. But the thing is that there's so many videos playing at one time, you can get lost for hours in there. So there's 12 that we really like using, and we've used a lot to great effect in business. And
And can the listener grab them there and put them?
Exactly. Yeah, you just save them to your computer, emails, save them to your phone, and then just copy and paste.
Okay, cool.
But they're not a little bit effective. They're hugely effective. Like, I mean, from everything from getting book deals to like getting famous people to talk to you or do whatever you want, getting girls to respond on dating, like massively effective.
Okay, I see them here. I can see you've got Louis C.K. as well, and you've got the image. So you just click on these things, do you? And you download it to your computer. Is that what you do?
Exactly. Yeah, just save as.
Save as, and then you just put it in your phone, and then, okay, great. Well, I'm gonna test that out.
Yeah, they're fun. So it's the same element. It's just recognizing that people are subject to a lot of waffle and boring stuff these days. And if you do anything that's comedic in nature or just shows you put a little bit of effort or it's different than the norm, people will respond because suddenly it grabs your attention.
Yeah. Okay. I like that. Well, this has been terrific. Any other last sort of words of wisdom about how the listener can get funnier and their speaking, their emails, their dates, anything else to just sort of sum this nicely up?
Yeah, I have a bunch of, I'm just going to publish it today actually, so it'll be out by the time people are listening to this, which is 50 tips on how to do this. So I'll do it. I've just finished a quick summary document of that, but I would say stick with your own stories because your own stories are always the safest and the funniest, but consciously write out those stories and edit them yourself and take out anything unnecessary and treat it like it's a joke that you're delivering as opposed to a story. So it needs a quick introduction, a punchline, and then taglines after that initial joke line. So be very conscious of your own stories, how many words you need to tell them, because most people will tell a 5-minute story and say it needs 5 minutes to tell that story. But if they were really forced, you could get it down to 30 or 40 seconds. And it's just that conciseness. Like, recognize whoever's sitting on the other side of the table, the phone, your audience, that they within 12 seconds can grab their phone and be lost in some other part of information. So just forced brevity is levity, Shakespeare used to say, and it still applies these days. Just get those funny stories, stick with your own stuff, be concise, and have fun with it. If it doesn't go well, then it's still funny by you acknowledging that you're not funny in the first place, and you'll still get a laugh.
I like that a lot. So thank you so much. I appreciate that. Tremendous value there. And make sure that you check out funnybiz.co, FUNNYBIZZ.co. You can find those little funny follow-up things,
gifts,
the cookie monster and Louis C.K. and all that stuff. The Pursuit of Polite Persistence is the name of the blog post article that David's got there on Funny Biz. And mate, this has been terrific. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Make sure you say hello to Rackman for me as well, will you?
I will. I'll say hello today.
All right. From one weird, funny Australian bastard to an Irish, funny, weird bastard. There you go.
Yeah, we'll need show notes for this. People will be like, we didn't understand any of that shit.
Well, thanks, mate. I appreciate your time. Take care.
Likewise. Great speaking to you.
James Swanwick here again. Thank you so much for listening to the show. I want to send you some free stuff. If you haven't yet got the Alcohol Freedom Formula, then you can get that at alcoholfreelifestyle.com/guide. The YouTube channel is alcoholfreelifestyle.com/YouTube. I put out lots of educational videos on my Instagram page at James Swanwick. You can also find me on TikTok at James Swanwick. If this show has benefited you, I would so appreciate you leaving a review and giving it 5 stars. We have a 5-day no alcohol challenge, a 30-day no alcohol challenge. You can get details over at alcoholfreelifestyle.com. And if you would like to apply to be part of Project 90, which is our flagship process where you get a community, 7 coaching calls per week are available to you, a like-minded community, mostly folks in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, then you are welcome to apply. You can get all the details over at alcoholfreelifestyle.com/Project 90, and the details are in the show notes. Thank you again for listening. I will catch you on the next one.